Looks good, Paul. Can't hear you yet.
But now then, hopefully you can hear me, and hopefully you can see Fred Axelgard picture in front.
Yes, we
All
have.
right, then let's get underway. And I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening in the ongoing Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum. There are lots of people on vacation, going to camps, and all kinds of things. Our our numbers, well, we commonly stay in the 20 to 40 range anyway, and so some people are going to be more available in the summertime, some will be less. But it's most gratifying when you find a good speaker and you get them to come back. And we've had that happen repeatedly on the forum. My wife initially said she would be surprised if we lasted more than 6 months. And here we are 6 years and haven't missed a Monday night yet. And that's largely because we keep getting very interesting researchers like Fred Axelgard, who presented to us previously on the title page of the Book of Mormon, and people who saw that will remember that it was rather amazing that here he pulled that much information out of the title page. He comes to us as a lifelong student of the Book of Mormon, an independent scholar. He's an internationalist, having lived in Iran, Greece, Japan, Taiwan, Switzerland, Saudi Arabia, and Lebanon. And I think I need to ask him to explain about Iran, since that tends to be a point of particular tension in our country today. And so perhaps he'll talk about that in his introduction this evening himself. Um, he's dealt as a negotiator on Arab Israeli peace issues, and that's another area where, of course, those of us that are involved in international affairs are extremely interested. He is compassionate about refugees. Oh, and by the way, on the same webpage next Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Joseph Smith III Home, Liberty Hall in Lamoni, we'll be hosting Dr. Rana Lair from UMKC, who is a specialist on refugees. And her presentation, I think, will be of interest to any of you that are internationalists as well. He is also very much interested in the ethics of peace building, the kinds of activities that we've seen with the Jimmy Carter administration. We've seen people like the the we've had numerous people in our world that have tried to do some peace building, and so to be able to give those people credit is something I think we need to do, because otherwise we tend to keep reemphasizing our history of war. His wife is Robin, and she shares his interest in international relations and refugees in particular, volunteering at Lifting Hands and International, serving on the Utah Valley Refugee Board. They have 5 children, 16 grandchildren, double what I have. And in his review of the Patrick Q. Mason Mormonism and Violence, he challenges Mormons not to fit comfortably in the narrative of national violence. And so I'm particularly happy to welcome him back, because clearly two of us are anxious to promote the cause of peace. And as the representative of the Joseph Smith III Home, and as someone who has climbed Mount Sinai, where we see the last 1,400 years of peace being uh, maintained by Muslims, Jews, and Christians, for us to be able to learn the lessons of peace and implement them is clearly a preferable option to killing children with bombs. It would indicate that there is a genuine need for creative new thinking that focuses upon discovering whether and how Mormonism might help to make the wider world of the present and the future a better place to live. And as I indicated earlier, his last presentation here was on the title page of the Book of Mormon, and tonight he'll address us on Mormon's editorial fingerprints. I find that fascinating, because to look for editorial fingerprints means that we should also be able to see the fingerprints of the divine. But to introduce that, then let's proceed with a prayer. Let us pray together. Divine presence in all that exists, generous giver of grace that persists, Father of life and all the dimensions on earth, whose creations are awesome, of eternal worth. We bow in appreciation that you created us too, in the midst of an eternity of what you chose to do. And you spoke to Moses, saying, you stand on holy ground, to remind us that on the holy is exactly where we are found. So this evening we speak to you with a favor to ask, that your spirit would touch and surround us with intensity in which we can bask. For your fingerprints are hiding throughout the Mormon book, as are those of its writers, for those with tenacity to look. And as we gain instruction from Brother Axelgard, we ask for elucidation to see, to patiently regard the evidences, the writers, the editors, your own prints too, that the faith of our participants can be intelligently challenged, magnified, caused to renew. And may we be stimulated to work to transform our world in which conflicts and wars increase, to learn the language, the culture, the subtleties of your offspring, the Prince of Peace, to respond appropriately to our spiritual DNA in our actions as well as in what we think and what we say. For it is an honor to live in this beautiful earth, to be considered in your image, humans, each a person of worth. It is an honor to feel your presence in all the ways it exists, especially with your invitation to accept the gift of eternal life, a gift so astounding in our world of dysfunction, it is difficult to apprehend how it persists. We thank you and we pray in the name of the Anointed One, Jesus. Amen. All right, Brother Axelgard, commonly we like to give the person a chance to determine in advance whether they want to be interrupted by people as they proceed, or if they want to wait for the interruptions until after the presentation is complete. And so let's begin there, if you would, please.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is ask people to, there'll be certain segments where I'll kind of stop and say, does that seem clear? Do you get it? Do you have questions? There are kind of 5 different kinds of fingerprints of Mormons that we'll look at. And I think after explaining and then delving into each one, I'll just kind of pause and say, any thoughts? I will give you a heads up. The last one, the 5th piece of it, is the one that I will spend the longest time on. So I don't want to kind of dally too long on the early elements. But Paul, I think it worked well last time to have people feel free to ask for clarification. So
Good. Fine, thank you. Let's proceed.
Okay, just really quickly on Iran. When I was a little boy, my dad worked for a dairy company based out of San Francisco. And in those years, between the mid 50s and the mid 60s, there were lots of US military stationed in places around the world. And basically, his company was under contract in those particular locations to provide dairy products, if you will, to the US military to help supply the commissaries. So we lived in Japan, we lived in Taiwan, we lived in Iran, and those were my 3rd and 4th grade years. And then my 5th and 6th grade years were in Greece. And then most astounding of all, we went back to the cosmopolitan headquarters of Price, Carbon County, Utah. So
All right.
anyway, that's the background to that question. I do have a deep appreciation for the Iranian people and the immense treasure that the Persian civilization is. So anyway, my ears are attuned to what's going on there in my heart as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click and share. Again, hoping that that's clear, and I'm going to try to figure out a way to get rid of the picture so that I don't see you guys. Boy, it's okay. I hope that might work. I see you, Paul, up there in the corner. In the last part of the presentation, we're going to go through quite a few passages of scripture in the book of Alma, and I've jotted folks' names down as we discussed here as we were talking. If you don't mind, I'll just kind of take turns and ask if you would be willing to read so that you don't get hear my voice too much, and it gives me time to think of what I want to say.
All right, sure.
Anyway, it looks like we got about 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 folks, and that's the way we'll do it if that's okay. All right. Repetitive resumptions in Alma 1 to 29. The part of the Book of Mormon I'm looking at is Alma chapters 1 to 29. We can go into why those chapters at some point, but maybe it'll become clear with time. I found this Book of Mormon, Old Book of Mormon, on my bookshelf and opened up to the page inside where Moroni's Promise is contained. And you'll see a date there. October 1978, draw near to Mormon. Folks, that's how long I have been looking for Mormon's fingerprints in the Book of Mormon. It's not quite 50 years. If you want to call it an obsession, feel free. But it's been a very, very rewarding journey. Certainly has blessed my adult life to have this ongoing engagement with the book. So here's the question that I'll start with. What makes the Book of Mormon Mormon's book? The most comprehensive, perhaps the easiest answer is it's his book because he abridged most of it. But let's pause and think for a second. What does that mean that he abridged most of it? It means that the book is a reflection of Mormon's own spiritual insight, his openness to the Spirit, his native intelligence, and his skill at writing and summarizing, and his skill at managing the text. I'll use that phrase maybe a few times tonight, but I think what we'll see are fingerprints where he is shaping, managing, sometimes correcting himself in the text. What it means that he abridged it is that it reflects choices he made about what events to include, what events not to include. And those that he does include, is he going to summarize them or describe them in detail? What sermons will he quote? And which ones will he summarize? And when he quotes, how much of it and which portions of it? And all of this happens to reflect Mormon's own life as well. My belief is that he wrote everything that we have in the last 10 years of his life. We can talk about that in the Q&A, if you will. While his society around him was collapsing, and that he was able to write as he did shows his courage and his determination, as well as his faith and his skill. I found a quote that I'll share with you here by the Jewish philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel. And I think this is a beautiful way to summarize Mormon's role. The prophet is a person, not a microphone. He's endowed with a mission, with the power of a word not his own, that accounts for his greatness, but also he's endowed with temperament, concern, character, and individuality. As there is no resisting the impact of divine inspiration, so at times there is no resisting the vortex of his own temperament. The word of God reverberates in the voice of man. I really appreciate This is a summary, if you will, of what I discovered, and I estimate this was about 2,500 hours of research over a course of maybe 3 or 4 years to find these evidences of Mormon's editorial activity in the first half of Alma. I've categorized them under 5 headings. The first is kind of obvious, just where he uses the first person pronoun to indicate that he, very obviously, that he is speaking. There are the headings. Again, it's kind of obvious when he places a heading in the text, but there are also places when he omits things. And that's part of managing the text, is deciding what to omit. This next thing, the demonstrative pronoun phrases, I'll talk about a little bit later, but as you can see, there's lots of those. And they have different purposes. They fulfill different editorial functions. But I think they do reflect very clearly the involvement, the active involvement of Mormon as the narrator and editor here. The fourth one actually is the one we're going to spend most time on. He has a style of digression, and a lot of those digressions take the shape of something called a repetitive resumption. And this is a literary tool that's been identified at some length in the Old Testament. And the last thing is the corrective or. You can call these do-overs. These are instances in these chapters where Mormon says, let me reword that, basically, or restate that. Again, all of these indicate the presence, and I think the active presence of a loving and skillful narrator. I'll just I'm going to summarize as best I can, and then we'll dwell on the digressions and repetitive resumptions. But here I've just exerted every use of the first person in Alma 1 to 29. This doesn't include the use of the first person in Alma's sermons or in the teachings of the sons of Mosiah. This is the use of I and we in narrative, in the descriptive third person portion of the text. So you can see there's 3, 6, 9, 11, around 20 to 25 of those in the text. And I've highlighted one of those. Well, maybe let's look over in the second box. You see Alma 24, verse 19, verse 22, 26, 27, and 30. That phrase, and thus we see, which some people think that that's the only place where Mormon gets involved in the text. In that particular chapter, you have the most intensive use, 6 different usages in the space of about 11 to 12 verses for that phrase, and thus we see. But go back over now to the first box, and you'll see under Alma 15:18, it says, now, as I said, Alma having seen all these things. I highlight that one because this is my basis for saying all of these first person usages throughout these chapters, it's not Alma. Because you have now, as I said, the narrator speaking in the first person, and then immediately he speaks of Alma in the third person. So that confirms to me that it's Mormon's voice, Mormon's fingerprint, if you will, when you see that first person activity in these chapters. We can talk more about that later. Here, I just isolated the headings. Nothing new here, I hope. Excuse me, as careful students of the Book of Mormon, you realize that the headings that occur at the beginning of the books and at certain places within the books, that these are original to the narrator, to the editor, to the abridger. And so there's the heading for the book itself, the one at Alma 5, which is where he teaches the people of Zarahemla. Alma 7, there's a heading about him speaking to the people in Gideon. Alma 9 um, gives you a heads up to the words of Amulek and Alma to the folks in Ammonihah. Then at Alma 17 and Alma 21, you got headings that identify when the sons of Mosiah uh, records are being accessed. Okay. So let me pause there. We've gone through a couple of things. Are there any questions? The only face that I see on my screen is Paul. So either Paul, somebody call on somebody, or just chip up, or just let me know. If I don't hear any voices, then I'll assume I can move ahead.
Well, as usual, I'm one of the most inquiring people, and so I like further clarification. You're using the first 15 chapters of Alma to show that he is using the first person, but then why the abrupt change?
I'm sorry, which abrupt change are you talking about?
He's no longer using the first person. He is making reference to himself in third person.
Well, that is okay. Let me back up. When it says I, can you see my cursor? I'm
Yes,
moving it. You
yes,
guys okay? Now, as I said,
right.
that's
There's first
that's
person.
Mormon speaking. Now, as I said, okay, go back up here. It says Alma, after having established the church at Sidon, seeing a great check, yea, seeing the people were checked as to the pride of the hearts of their hearts. Now, as I said, now that's Mormon. Alma, having seen all these things, therefore he took Amulek and came over to the land of Zarahemla. So Mormon speaking in the first person, now as I said, he's repeating something he just said a minute ago, and then moving forward saying, Alma took Amulek over to the land of Zarahemla and took him to his own house.
Okay, but you're saying well, we see the first person only in the first 15 chapters.
No, these are the chapters that I isolated to look at.
Okay,
Mormon,
okay, that's the clarification I needed.
yeah. Mormon uses the first person throughout the edit, the abridged books that he worked on.
Okay.
But
Now,
it's very intensive in these chapters.
mhm.
And there's the headings. Any questions about the headings? I'm just going to I've highlighted in yellow here. Chapter 6 of Alma only has 8 verses, and it's a little pause in between Mormon quoting Alma's words to the people of Zarahemla, and then moving on to quote the people, his words to the people in Gideon. But the very last words that are in chapter 6, I think this is Mormon. He's, if you will, introducing the record about the sermon to the people in Gideon. And he says, and thus it is written, Amen. Um, he doesn't do that anywhere else in the Book of Mormon, but I think he's paying respect to the record that he's about to quote from. Okay.
One question, if I may, I what was the question? Oh, I wanted to clarify. We have what you're calling headings. Why would those headings have not have been clearly identified in the first edition?
Good question. Good question. That was um, I expect it was because the people that formatted it didn't know the book. If you remember my presentation on the title page,
That's right.
um,
Mhm.
the very first title page that was printed in the 1830 Book of Mormon, it broke into two, the reference to the Book of Ether. It
That's
says,
right.
and then took half of it, stuck it at the end of the first paragraph, had a paragraph break, and then stuck the rest of it at the beginning of the second paragraph, which to me was a pretty clear indication the person doing the formatting, the formatting, the arranging, the organizing the book um, was not familiar with its content.
Yeah, no, that's a very good answer. Thank you.
Okay. All right, here are some omissions. Again, I won't dwell on these too long, but I hope you'll see um, again uh, pretty clearly what's going on, what Mormon is doing. Beginning of chapter 8, Alma returned from having taught many things to the people in Gideon, but many things which cannot be written. So you know that Alma or Mormon had to omit part of that sermon to the people of Gideon. Same kind of message when he gets to the record of what happened in Ammonihah. At the end of chapter 9, he says, "Now the words of Amulek are not all written. Nevertheless, a portion of his words are written in this book." Again, Mormon giving a little indication of his shaping the record. And then at the end of chapter 11, he says it once again, "And thus ended the words of Amulek, comma, or this is all that I, Mormon, have written." Alma 13, after Alma has spoken, he says once again, "Alma spake many words which are not written in this book." Um, and then the next few, I call these implied or implicit omissions. Um, And many such things did they say to them, gnashing their teeth upon them. This is the wicked people in Ammonihah responding to Alma and Amulek. Many such things, all manner of things did they say unto them. But Mormon doesn't quote them, but he knows that they're there in the record. So that reflects an editorial decision on his part to omit some things from the source accounts, the source records that he's looking at. Same thing in the next couple of verses. And he talks about the sons of Mosiah being thrown into prison. They suffered many things. Again, I'm assuming those are things that he's not going into detail about, but he's summarizing there. So he's omitting. Uh, Same thing. King Lamoni responding to Ammon's teachings. And he did teach his people many things. Again, implicit omission there. And then a couple of verses later, there's kind of a summary. Ammon did teach them all things concerning things pertaining to righteousness. I hope you get a feel for my method, the way I'm looking at Mormon's descriptive narrative writing, trying to look at it through the eyes of somebody who's had to learn the history. He's reading it. He has to make choices about what to include, what to exclude, how much to include of what he does include, and so forth. So I expect this might be a strange way for some of you to think of the narrative, but as I say, after almost 50 years of looking for Mormon's fingerprints, you'll forgive me if I'm imagining them a little bit, but I think these are pretty valid examples.
If I may, I'd like to go back to that earlier question. You indicated that the editors would not have been familiar with the book, therefore they wouldn't have put the titles headings on. But Joseph Smith had an opportunity to do some editing, especially in the 1840 edition when that's the one I got to dig up in Nauvoo, and we don't see headings materialize there.
Yeah, you don't.
And he should have been quite familiar with the book.
Yeah, no good explanation except that what is it? Newton's third law? Things that are in motion tend to stay in motion. Once you've got an actual fact in front of you, it's easiest to just go with it. It wasn't until Orson Pratt, right, in 1879 that the reformatted Book of Mormon was kind of made more reader friendly, and he was a pretty astute editor. So yeah, I think there were other things going on as well. You might think of 1837, 1839, 1840, 1841, pretty busy years in Joseph's life as well. But no documentable answer to your question there, Paul.
Well, then Ebenezer Robinson was able to take a few editorial comments from him when he went to Cincinnati to to get that book stereotyped indicates that Joseph at least had some chance to edit, but I just find it remarkable that your astute recognition of these headings is something that got bypassed nonetheless.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm not so sure I'm astute. Christensen was swimming with me this morning, and I don't think there was much astuteness in what we were doing. But chlorine is a great fountain of youth for those of you that swim. You know that. Okay, this is something called demonstrative pronoun phrases. There are, I think, almost 40 of these in these chapters. And a demonstrative pronoun phrase is simply a phrase that has either this or these or that in it, followed by the verb to be. And as we go through these, I don't really have time to go through all of them, but I hope you'll see that they are a tool that Mormon is using in some cases to emphasize things, in some cases to emphasize the importance of things, times to emphasize the holiness of things, other times to set up a quotation of a long quotation of a speaker. Anyway, so I'll just run my cursor. I put some asterisks by the ones I want to go into, and there's another page after this one. Now, this was a great trial to those that did stand fast. Just Mormon emphasizing the tough things that were going on in the church. Same thing he does a few verses later in chapter 2, verse 3. Looking down here, chapter 3, verse 14, he said, "Thus the word of God is fulfilled, for these are the words which he said to Nephi." So that's again Mormon setting up a quotation of words that God spoke to Nephi in the following verses. A few verses later, instead of talking about the words of God, he's talking about the promises of the Lord unto Nephi and his seed. Again, these demonstrative pronouns, just think it to me, it's like Mormon taking and pointing at the text. These are the words he said. These are the promises of the Lord. Chapter 4, verse 13. Now, this was a great cause for lamentations among the people. Again, emphasizing a historical trend or development that he wanted to draw attention to. This in chapter 8, verse 31 has to do with the fact that Alma and Amulek couldn't be confined to prison. And what I see him doing here is saying, now this was done that the Lord might show forth his power. This is Mormon giving a little bit of editorial input there, introducing it with what I'm calling a demonstrative pronoun phrase. I'm kind of proud of identifying these. This is me not being very astute, not being very humble, but I've talked to Grant Hardy and Joe Spencer, two of the best scholars in the LDS faith on the Book of Mormon, and they had not recognized any of these in Mormon's intervention. So I think they're valid, and I'm proud of them, and I'm going to stick with them until Bry tells me otherwise when we swim on Wednesday morning. Look at this now in chapter 11, verse 4. What's going on here is he's giving a very negative depiction of the lawyers there in Ammonihah. Part of his depiction is him going into a summary of their currency. You might remember that goes on for some time. And he sets that up again with a demonstrative pronoun phrase. Now, these are the names of their different pieces of gold. Then halfway through those verses, he says, now this is the value of the lesser numbers of the reckoning. And then he goes, now this is their number according to the reckoning. Again, a verse I've already talked about at the end of chapter 11, he says, thus ended the words of Amulek, or this is all that I have written. Again, here's the rest of them. These are all of them that I've been able to find. In chapter 17, he's talking about the sons of Mosiah and how they prepared themselves for their mission. And he interrupts to say, but this is not all. They had given themselves to much prayer and fasting. Again, I think that might be a passage that is familiar to you. And one of the couple, right in the very next couple of verses, he talks about their circumstances and their journeyings. And he again uses these demonstrative pronoun phrases. These are the circumstances that attended them. These were their journeyings, having taken leave of their father Mosiah. And again, still in chapter 17, this was the cause for which the sons of Mosiah had undertaken the work. Later in chapter 17, he actually gives us the thoughts of Ammon when Ammon is encountering King Lamoni. And he, again, pointing right to it, these were the thoughts of Ammon. Chapter 18, talking about the religious tradition among the Lamanites. This was the tradition of Lamoni, which he received from his father, belief in the Great Spirit. Once again, that asterisk one in chapter 18, again, he writes, this is not all, meaning Ammon expounded unto them the plan of redemption and the coming of Christ. I think it's significant that what he wants to emphasize here is the preaching about Christ that Ammon did. So this is, again, where I see him using a demonstrative pronoun phrase to bring emphasis to bear on something he thought was important. I'm going down here to the part I've highlighted in yellow. This is where I'm making another connection that allows me to draw a conclusion. I think the reason I believe that all of these uses of the demonstrative pronoun phrases belong to Mormon is right here. In this chapter 23, he's just listed all of the cities where the Lamanites were converted to the Lord. And he says, and these are the names of the cities of the Lamanites, which were converted to the Lord. And a couple of sentences later, and these are they that laid down the weapons of their rebellion. And then in verse 15, he's referring back and referring to what he's just said. And he says, therefore, we have named all the cities of the Lamanites. That's a first person usage that indicates to me that Mormon is the one responsible for writing things up the way they are here. Anyway, I'll pause here. This is a huge mouthful to explain. I debated whether I should go into it with you guys, but I gave a presentation on these things a while back, and time constraints were such that I had to leave out most of what I'd found. You guys, I'm sorry, are the victims of my disappointment over not being able to say before what I had in all that I had in mind. Any questions here?
I find it curious that here he uses we have named all the cities, whereas earlier he was using the I. Is that something of the royal acknowledgement, or I'm curious about that.
That's a good question. I think to some degree he uses them interchangeably. Let me see if I can go back up and we'll just see these. See, he uses I and we.
Oh, it does.
Thus we see, and now we see Ammon could not be slain. We will return to the account of Ammon and his brethren.
Right.
It's a little maybe it is the royal we, but it seems to just be another way that he indicates his presence, his editorial presence in these passages.
I like your summation. Congratulations on the insight. I think this is awesome.
Well, thank you, Paul. You're awfully encouraging. I hear other people's teeth grinding over all this detail, but that's okay. All right, this is what I'm calling the corrective or, and here I'm only giving you 7 out of 20 usages that I found in these chapters. You can call these the do-overs, okay? Where he uses the word or to introduce a change that he wants to make in what he's just said. They carried Nehor upon the top of the hill Manti, and there he was caused, or rather did acknowledge between the heavens and the earth that what he had taught was not from God. The next chapter, and thus he cleared the ground. This is Alma when he's a military leader. He cleared the ground, or rather the bank, which was on the west side of the river Sidon. Seems kind of a trivial thing, but it warms my heart a little bit to think of Mormon wanting to be this precise in his language. Sometimes I see a broader purpose in it. Other times it's just him being editorially careful to me. This is it. Oh, let me go back. All right, chapter 3, verse 11. This is a summation. Again, this is a long segment where he's talking about the curse that came upon the Lamanites, the distinction between the Lamanites and the Nephites. And he says at one point, whosoever believed in the commandments of God and kept them were called the Nephites. But then he pauses and says, or the people of Nephi from that time forth. And I think in this case, he's actually going back through history. He's saying, going back to Nephi's time, when the split happened, the people from that time forth were called the people of Nephi. In chapter 14, there's a phrase that talks about the decision by the wicked leaders to cast into the fire the people of Ammonihah who believed in what Alma and Amulek were teaching. And he says, whosoever believed or had been taught to believe in the word of God, they caused that they should be cast into the fire. That's an interesting, you may not think that that's a do-over, but hold your breath just for a second. In chapter 16, verse 16, you've got an interesting, they went forth to prepare the minds of the children of men, or to prepare their hearts to receive the word prior to the coming of Christ. Again, it's kind of a tender do-over, kind of a tender adjustment in language that I think that Mormon makes there. Now, in each of these cases, it might be that what he's doing is changing his mind and reverting to language that Alma used in the original record. That might be the case as well. But for one reason or another, he's to me indicating editorial proactiveness by these do-overs. In chapter 23, verse 6, he's talking about the Lamanites who believed. And just compare the way he uses his do-over here with the way he uses it up here in chapter 14. In chapter 23, he says, speaking of the Lamanites, as many as believed, or as many as were brought to the knowledge of the truth, never did fall away. That's the way that verse ends. So to me, it's a very similar usage to that one in chapter 14. So as I say, there's another 13 or so of these do-overs. I'll just scroll back here. Actually, I think it's the next. Yeah. Here's that chart again. Here are all the do-overs, all the instances of the corrective ors that I found in these chapters. So like I say, there's about 20 or 21 of them, and I just gave you a handful of them. We're now going to dive in here, and I'm assuming by now you're tired of hearing my voice. So this is where I've got your names, if you won't mind, Robert, I'll start with you, and then James, then Alice and Joetta. Anyway, I'll call on you if you don't mind when I come to a passage that I'd like to ask you to read. But here we go. Okay, I'm coming to the conclusion that digressions are a style, an aspect of the style of Mormon's writing. Repetitive resumptions are a subset of the digressions. So this is my definition. A digression is when the narrator says something, he moves away from it, and he comes back to it. using the same words. That's what a repetitive resumption is. When he comes back from a digression and clearly is using the same wording once or twice, I think it's a thought that he's renewing. But most of the time, I think you'll see he uses the same words to come back and recapture his thought. Um, the effect of this digression and coming back is you bring a highlight to the thing that he's digressing to talk about. And then again, it shows his management of the narrative when he goes back to resume the train of thought he had. So why digress in the first part? Again, I think it's a matter of writing style. It may be a function of stressful circumstances. He says something, says, I want to add this part to it. And he didn't have the time or the circumstance to think it out in advance, which raises an interesting question that I have only heard little discussion of. Is Mormon's abridgment a first draft? When he was inscribing on the plates, did he have a rough draft in front of him? And um, anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole tonight. And even if you ask my opinion, Paul, I'm not going to give it. Okay. So I think it's a matter of style. It gives him digressions, give him a chance to give some local background. These are the customs. It's kind of color commentary to bring people on board with the setting that he's describing. In other cases, it's you just watch him delving into detail. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. To me, it all just gives evidence of an active, interested narrator. We're going to go through every single one of these repetitive resumptions, unless somebody cuts me off. But I'm hoping to move quickly. I'm hoping you'll get the gist of it pretty quickly. And there we go. All right, I'll read the first one, and then Robert, you'll be next. But this is now it came to pass. This is the very first verse in the first chapter of Alma, right after the heading. Came to pass in the first year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi, digression. From this time forward, King Mosiah, having gone the way of all the earth, having warred a good warfare, walking uprightly before God, leaving none to reign in his stead. So he's going back and capturing a little bit of recent history from the preceding chapters. Nevertheless, he, meaning Mosiah, had established laws. They were acknowledged by the people, therefore they were made obliged to abide by the laws which he made. And now he goes back. And it came to pass in the first year of the reign of the Alma in the judgment seat. So that is a repetitive resumption that occurs in the third person in the narrative descriptive part of Mormon's writing, not in the quoted material, not in the sermons. This is where Mormon is giving you his words on what's going on. Okay. All right, Robert, do you mind reading this one?
Number 7, and he began to contend with him sharply that he might lead away the people of the church.
So this is Nehor arguing with Gideon.
Okay. But the man withstood him, admonishing him with the words of God. 8, now the name of the man was Gideon, and it was he who was an instrument in the hands of God in delivering the people of Limhi out of bondage. 9, now because Gideon withstood him with the words of God, ...
Okay, so you see that verse 8 is, again, a little bit of historical background about who Gideon was, but you've got the word withstood, you got the words of God. That's what I think Mormon is doing. It's using a repetitive resumption to help paint the picture of what's going on. Okay, Robert, thank you. You did that brilliantly. This is a little bit longer. I don't know that we need to read this whole one, so I'll summarize it a bit. This is in Alma chapter 1, when things are going very well in the church. This is a description of the abundance that the church is experiencing. And you'll see the yellow up here and the yellow down there. It's not really the exact same words, but certainly the same idea. What he does in between is goes into all that detail. They had abundance of flocks, herds, fatlings, gold, silk, all manner of good homely cloth. And they didn't send away the naked, the hungry, the thirsty. Their hearts were not set on riches. They were liberal to all. I think that is a digression in Mormon's writing, which he ends by coming back to the text, the train of thought that he had before the digression. Again, this is Mormon's writing, his way obviously he took all of that information right from the source record, but why he decides in this particular instance to highlight with all of this detail, well, it's obvious. This is the way we should be. This is a message he wants to emphasize. Okay. James, do you mind reading here? If you don't want to, just be silent and I'll go on to Alice. But James, would you be so kind? And Joetta, you're next after Alice.
Let's see. And it came to pass in the commencement of the 5th year of their reign, there began to be a contention among the people for a certain man being called Amaleki. I think that's how it's pronounced. He being a very cunning man, yea, a wise man as to the wisdom of the world, he being after the order of the man that slew Gideon by the sword, whom was executed according to the law. Now this Amaleki had by his cunning drawn away much people after him.
Thank you. So what he repeats there is Amaleki's name and the word cunning, that he was a cunning person. In between, you get background about Amaleki and his connection with Nehor. James, thank you very much for that. Okay, Alice, this is still in chapter 2. Would you be willing to read these couple of verses? Okay. Joetta, are you there? Would you read them?
Yes.
Thank you.
Therefore, the people of the Nephites were aware of the intent of the Amalekites, and therefore they did prepare to meet them. Yes, they did arm themselves with swords, and with centimeters, and with bows, and with arrows, and with stones, and with slings, and with all manner of weapons of war of every kind. And thus they were prepared to meet at the Amalekites at the time of their coming. And there were appointed captains and higher captains and chief captains according to their numbers.
Okay. Do you see what's going on here? Again, they did prepare to meet the Amalekites. That idea is repeated, not quite verbatim. And in between, he just goes into all of the detail about the weapons that they brought to bear in their preparation. Okay. Joetta, thank you. All right. Paul, would you kindly read this? This is just one verse in Alma chapter 2.
Verse 20. And it came to pass that when Alma could pursue the Amalekites no longer, he caused that his people should pitch their tents in the valley of Gideon. The valley being called that after Gideon, who was slain by the hand of Nehor with the sword. And in this valley the Nephites did pitch their tents for the night.
Okay. You getting the vibe?
If I may, I'm intrigued because I read the Book of Mormon several times in my childhood. I clearly have been influenced by its long sentences, and to see these rabbit hole sentences that are so regularly included in the Book of Mormon helps to explain why my editors are having so much difficulty with me. And furthermore, the sandwiches here of words reflect my poetry because most of my poems are a sandwich in which you have a same word or at least the same sound in the beginning, a couple of lines, and at the end of those lines with the rabbit hole in the middle.
Well, it's a beautiful way to write. It's a beautiful way to convey thought.
Well, but thank you for highlighting it for me. I hadn't realized the Book of Mormon source of my own style.
All right. Let's see. Terry, are you there? Would you kindly read this verse? This is the next chapter, the first verse.
Okay, I have a question about the previous thing.
Okay.
That same thing has been covered 3 times. That Nehor cut off the head of Gideon 3 times in I don't know how many different verses. Do you have any explanation for that?
I have an absolutely brilliant explanation. He thought it was important.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting? Um, there are people, sometimes you can tell that Mormon feels strongly about the people he's writing about, right? Um, Clearly, he felt a close personal relationship to Alma the Younger. I mean, we have 44 chapters in the Orson Pratt formatting of the Book of Mormon, devoted to the writings, summarizing the writings and teachings of Alma. He writes about Moroni, Captain Moroni. And I think he must have had a very tender spot in his heart for Gideon. And but I think the other part of it is, and this is something that comes out very strongly in this first 29 chapters, the wickedness of the Nephites as evidenced in the order of the Nehors. So he's doing two, I think in almost each case, he's doing both, isn't he? Emphasizing Gideon
Yeah.
and Nehor's wickedness, Gideon's righteousness and Nehor's wickedness. And in the end, I think
He's very specific about the wrong that they did to that
Yeah.
one person.
Yeah. But when you think about it, just kind of step back, transport yourself from, what is this? We're about, 70, 85 BC in Alma's time. Now take yourself back to Mormon's time. And Mormon is seeing how things finally play out in the very ultimate sense from the Nephites going after wickedness. And I think in these first 29 chapters, I just see him writing from the pain also of his own day, if you don't mind my putting it that way.
Fine.
All right, Terry, I think the next one, can you do this one? Thank you.
Okay, Alma 3:1. And it came to pass that the Nephites who were not slain by the weapons of war, after having buried those who had been slain, now the number of the slain were not numbered because of the greatness of their number. And after they had finished burying their dead, they all returned to their lands and to their houses and their wives and their children.
Thank you. In this particular case, you see a couple of dashes being used to separate out, if you will, the digression. That happens a few times in Mormon's writing. I thinking particularly back, I think Mosiah 28. He's got a neat little digression he does there about the sons of Mosiah. But again, the words are pretty, almost the same. After having buried those had been slain, and then going back to the same idea after they had finished burying their dead. Anyway, that's just the background note. The greatness of the number was just great. There's a similar observation Mormon makes in chapter 28 about the greatest conflict since the time of Lehi taking place in those chapters. But maybe this is a little foreshadowing of that. Okay, this is just way too long to read, but let me just point out, and this is kind of a passage that makes us in our day and age quite uncomfortable, talking about the curse of the Lamanites and the distinction, the skin coloring between the come on, all right, I need to go back. There we go. In any event, these verses from 5 through 12, I see as a digression where Mormon goes into the history. He goes back to the Lord's promises to Nephi, his words to Nephi. That's in here, right here. But look at these yellow markings. The Amlicites were distinguished from the Nephites, for they had marked themselves, keep doing that, with red in their foreheads. Now look at verse 13. Now we will return again to the Amlicites. To me, that's Mormon saying, okay, I'm going to go back to what I was talking about, speaking in the first person. We'll return again to the Amlicites, for they had set a mark upon them. They also set the mark upon themselves, yea, even a mark of red upon their foreheads. A very specific, to me, repetition of wording there. Again, just I think Mormon's way of writing and summarizing, and if sometimes he makes a historical point, other times he's giving you right up to date. There were so many killed we couldn't number them, but here he's going back into history and tradition, if you will. Any thoughts about that? I know this is, as I said, an uncomfortable passage for those of us reading in our day and age, but I see Mormon's hand in there pretty, if you will, obviously.
Well, it's interesting in historic times that the Pawnee Indians did mark themselves with red. The only tribe that I know of, but the Pawnee were noted for that.
Thank you, Terry. Where are the Pawnees?
Pawnees are from Nebraska, Kansas, sort of like the middle of the country.
Right smack in the middle. Okay.
Yeah.
I had a grandson that just went to Omaha to play in a baseball tournament, so that's not relevant to anything except that I love having grandsons that love baseball. Okay, let's see. Blair, do you mind take this is a little bit longer, but if you would go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't read very well. I'm half blind. Can you
Okay,
pass that on to somebody else, please?
yeah, we'll have somebody with a musical voice. I guess that's Shane. You pay close attention, and I may come back to you if you've got a question. Shane, can you go ahead and read these 3 verses?
Yes. So that when he had finished his work at Melech, he departed thence and traveled 3 days' journey on the north of the land of Melech. And he came to a city which was called Ammonihah. Now it was the custom of the people of Nephi to call their lands and their cities and their villages, yea, even all their small villages, after the name of him who first possessed them. And thus it was with the land of Ammonihah. And it came to pass that when Alma had come to the city of Ammonihah, he began to preach the word of God unto them.
Okay, you get the drift? He's giving you a little bit of insight into Nephite customs, naming how they deal with their geography, so to speak. Okay. Shane, thank you very much. I'm circling the word yea there. I believe that this, throughout all of the Book of Mormon, is an indicator of Mormon's emphasis, Mormon's editorial involvement. It's 3 small letters, but if you go through and trace and see how these, again, I'm not talking about inside of sermons, right? Not inside of quoted material, but in the narrative, descriptive portion of Mormon's writing, this yea comes up beautifully. Actually, can somebody in the background, okay, Bri, you've got either you or Sherry, look up Mosiah chapter 18, verse 30. Okay, I'll have you read that in a minute because this is a beautiful example of Mormon using the word yea to emphasize something in a very spiritual context. And you'll often find yea and thus occurring pretty close together. Okay, Brian, just jump in when you found Mosiah 18:30. Is Bryce still with us or did he go?
Okay, there we go. Okay. 1830. Well, it's one I don't have marked. I have marked the ones up above. And now it came to pass. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. And now it came to pass that all this was done in Mormon, yea, by the waters of Mormon, in the forest that was near the waters of Mormon, yea, the place of Mormon, the waters of Mormon, the forest of Mormon. How beautiful are they to the eyes of them who there came to the knowledge of their Redeemer, yea, and how blessed are they, for they shall sing to his praise forever.
Isn't that beautiful? Does looking at for that yay kind of help you trace Mormon's thoughts or just his emotions as he goes through that tremendous summary of what happened there at the Waters of Mormon? Bri, thank you. Okay, we're on to Alma 8, 30 to 32. I don't remember how far we are into. I think we're a little more than halfway through. I can speed this up. Paul, just give me a heads up when you think I've abused my privileges enough, okay?
You're talking about being halfway through your overall analysis, or
Or just the redemptive resumptions or the coming repetitive resumptions.
well, if you'd like to be scheduled for a time in July to come back, I do have open spots.
Well,
If you want to conclude, but I think you probably want to conclude this tonight. But,
yeah, let me go ahead. If people, I'm not seeing people's faces. Do people seem interested?
I am.
Okay, well, I love the Book of Mormon, but I honestly don't think that we have looked at the text very carefully. And this is a very selfish assessment because if there's one thing that should be obvious to look for is the fingerprints of the guy that we say edited the thing, abridged the thing. And, to go to this level of detail, to be this picky, if you will, about looking at how he wrote, what he wrote, I just think that's part of respecting the text before people go off with ethics and theology and other stuff. It just it just makes me feel better that people have really exercised themselves in the text. And so it's a little bit of a selfish motivation, and I'm being a little self-righteous there. Probably I'll hear from Bri about this on Wednesday again, but that's why I go into this. I just really think it's important. Anyway, here is Alma and Amulek going forth to declare the words of God among the people filled with the Holy Ghost. And then this talks about the fact that because of the power of God that was with them, they couldn't be confined. And then here we have one of those demonstrative pronoun phrases. This was done that the Lord might show forth his power. And again, he says went forth, began to preach and prophesy according to the spirit and power the Lord had given them. Again, it's the same thing. This is just that long going on about the lawyers and the currency. And I'll just point out the last verse in chapter 10 says the object of these lawyers was to get gain. They got gain according to their employ. Verse 20 in the next chapter, after going through all of this background on the currency, he says, now is for the sole purpose to get gain because they receive their wages according to their employ. Again, it's just a way that Mormon writes. Here he's with Zeezrom. Let me see. Carol, are you there? This is a short one. Would you like to read that? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Carol, with an E at the end?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Am I
Yes,
coming through? Yes. May I digress 1 minute for a question?
please.
You said that he digressed in so much of his writing. Alma 1, 104, of course, this is Community of Christ book. It says, and the skins of the Lamanites were dark according to the mark which was set upon their fathers, which was a curse upon them because of their transgressions. Is that the same thing that we were talking about just in chapter 3?
Yes, yes. I'm sorry I wasn't able to set these up using versification that you're familiar with. And Paul, I'll bother you and Robert next time to help me do that, so I can do these side by side, and it'll make sense to more of you.
It is a convenience we would appreciate.
Okay, thank you.
And to read this?
Please, thank you.
Yes. And these Rome began to question Amulekite, saying, Will ye answer me a few questions which I shall ask you? And Zizram was a man who was an expert in the devices of the devil, that he might destroy that which was good. Therefore he said unto Amulekite, Will ye answer the questions which I shall put unto you?
Thank you. Thank you. So just a short digression there to let you know about Zizram's character. Again, almost verbatim repeating the same thing on both sides of that sandwich. Carol, thank you. All right. I'm going to skip over this one because we talked about it a little bit earlier, but it's another sandwich I see here. You might remember this one. This is right before the people of Ammonihah are destroyed. He has a very explicit reference to the 11th year on the 5th day of the 2nd month. And then he digresses to say there've been a lot of peace for several years. And then he repeats again on the 5th day of the 2nd month in the 11th year, there's a cry of war throughout the land. So in some cases, I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, he's obviously drawing attention. And I think maybe documenting the reality of the prophecies of the destruction of Ammonihah coming to pass. I'll skip through this one as well. And this is about Alma and the sons of Mosiah. They separated themselves and departed from one another. And then this talks about the mission that they went to and the need for teaching the Lamanites. And then he says, once again, therefore they separated themselves one from another. So again, another sandwich there. Here in the sandwich, you have just talking about the custom. When they captured a Nephite, the king could have them slain, thrown into captivity or prison, according to his will and pleasure. Here in the middle of the sandwich is just the background about the waters of Sebus and the fact that that's where the Lamanites drove their flocks. And again, the same wording, going forth with their flocks to the place of water before and afterwards. This is about Ammon. Anyway, I think you guys get the drift. Let me see if I can find one or two more to emphasize, and then I'll stop. This is an interesting one because the sandwich portion is Mormon going back to the words that the Lord spoke unto his father, to Mosiah, saying that that he would protect the sons of Mosiah on their mission. So that's again another indication to me that it's Mormon doing the editing because he goes back to a previous book. Could have been Alma, but it looks to me like Mormon there. Okay, we talked about this verse a little bit too. This has to do with Ammon wanting and his brethren wanting to take the Lamanites out of danger, the ones who had believed. They saw the work of destruction, and in the middle of the sandwich is that saying they were treated as though they were angels sent from God to save them from everlasting destruction. So let me stop sharing. That is more than you ever wanted to know about Mormon's editorial fingerprints on the first half of first half of Alma. And if you want to think of, don't worry, I'm not going to do it for the rest of the Book of Mormon. Like I say, this study took me about 2,500 hours of obsessive compulsive behavior. So thank you. I'll just conclude by saying I really, Mormon has worked his way into my heart. There's a lot, many, many dimensions about him. I do get pretty upset when people get to the Alma, the war chapters, and say, well, what do you expect? Mormon was a general. And that's all they think is important to know about Mormon. His care, his intelligence, his feeling, his empathy, wanting to talk about the customs of the people. Anyway, it's just beautiful. Uh, he's a real person to me, and his work is a work of art and a work of faith and a work of deep, deep devotion that I love dearly. Thank you for letting me share that with you, and I'll understand if I'm never invited back again. Thanks, Blair.
As far as I'm concerned, your invitation back again is secure. We like these extraordinary pieces of research that we pick up at the forum, and yours is just an excellent demonstration. Roger has a hand up. Let's give him a chance to jump in here.
Okay, Fred, I applaud your work as well. I think it's excellent use of your 50 years to find those kinds of things and just to show your passion for the book and the author and all the things. So I really appreciate it. I've got several questions. I'm going to try to keep it to two or three.
Please.
So as you went through that, I was thinking that you could argue that those digressions and repetitions um, don't make sense from a guy who's trying to abridge and shorten a document. You know, what's he doing? You know, how's he just getting down one set of thoughts and oh, by the way, this and that. So any thoughts on that? I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
bother me. It almost makes me more believable that it's a human being. But what do you think?
Well, let me give you two half thoughts instead of one whole thought, because
Okay.
again, Brian knows me well, and I tend to come up with half thoughts lots of the time. One half thought is it may have been a time when he had more leisure to write. He wasn't fighting all day, every day, right? That's one thought. The stronger thought that I have is that he loved Alma the younger. He devoted such a huge portion of his abridgment to Alma. I just have the feeling of a personal connection there between Mormon and Alma, so that he would be this uncautious about brevity with Alma's writings. I can appreciate that. I'll give you one other quick thought. It's Alma 29 in the LDS edition of the Book of Mormon, but it starts off with, "Oh, that I were an angel and could have the wish of my heart, that I might go forth and speak with the trump of God, with a voice to shake the earth." When you think about the beauty of Alma's soul that comes through in that chapter, that's Mormon investing his self in the beauty of Alma's soul. The only other chapter that I can find in the entire Book of Mormon like that is 3rd Nephi chapter 5, the last half of it or so, where Mormon talks about himself being a descendant of Nephi. Sorry, that's again in the LDS edition, but it's where he says, I'm a pure descendant of Nephi, and I was commanded to write this book. And then he goes off on a long digression about the importance of this book to gathering the house of Israel. I mean, it goes on for about 14 verses. But Alma's biography and Mormon's biography, I just put those two chapters right by each other, and I go back and forth and just look at two beautiful servants of God, whose lives and devotion we have captured for us in this tremendous book. Sorry, that was a long answer, Roger. The next one will be a lot shorter.
That's fine. I get it. I don't think there's a perfect answer anyway. There's just some speculation, but that's a good answer as any. So that brings up another question. A fourth one is your 1970s LDS Book of Mormon looked like it had an angel with a trump there. Is that where that came from?
Yes, I guess so. I guess so.
Okay.
Uh, that's that's a very old version. Oh, there we
Yeah.
go. Carol, thank you. Yours, see, you saw how faded the blue was on mine?
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
never thought of that or where that might have come from, but there you go. You might have just come up with the verse that generated that picture.
Yeah,
Uh,
it will be. Thank you.
so a couple other quick questions. You obviously have devoted most of your life to doing this. Why did you pick Alma 1 to 29 to show us? It seems arbitrary to me, but I know that you've done it for the rest as well. What was your where'd you stop at 29? I mean, why not 30 or why not
Um,
Mosiah?
Well, I have done a study like this on the Book of Mosiah. It's about Mormon's hand, but it takes a little different tack. And I hope someday to publish the Mosiah study, the Alma 1 to 29 study, and then I want to do a study on Mormon's own writings, like right in his, the end of Third Nephi, Fourth Nephi, and Mormon 1 to 7, I think, are kind of a unit. But I stopped at Alma 29, stopped there primarily because, well, two things. It was too much to expect to do everything, right? Um, and when you get that beautiful chapter, oh, that I were an angel and could have the wish of my heart, and Alma goes on gushing and expressing himself to the Lord, I thought that is a good punctuation mark. The next chapters go off in the mission to the Zoramites. It's a different kind of writing. I liked the complexity of him quoting Alma in Alma speaking to Zarahemla and to Gideon and to Ammonihah, and then the complexity of trying to weave in the Sons of Mosiah records. That really captivated me. So I think I thought that was a sizable chunk and it fit together well. Alma chapter 28 is the war that grew out of the Lamanites being taken with the sons of Mosiah back to the land of Jershon. And then Alma, oh, that I were an angel is a direct follow on from that account. So
Okay.
that's it. It was a little bit arbitrary, but not entirely.
Okay. Okay, one more and then I'll let someone else jump in. So you've obviously done a lot of work. Have you done any work in the Book of Ether to see if Moroni did something similar, or that's just another study? Have you looked at that from Moroni's writings at all?
I took a few years off to do a study of the Book of Ether, and fools that they are, the Journal of the Book of Mormon Studies published it, and it was about just the prophetic legacy inherent in the Book of Ether. Um, I didn't look for the same kinds of things. The thing that I found in Ether was, okay, can I tell you how petty I am? There was a guy that wrote about Alma or Mosiah 28, and where Mormon says it is expedient that all people should see this record of the Jaredites. You might remember that verse. It's near the end of the book of Mosiah. And this particular very smart guy took Mormon to task for not doing that himself, for leaving it to Moroni. And that really upset me. Can imagine. Um, because it would have meant Mormon already had to read 1,000 years worth of history, right? Okay. To do the abridgment, we tend to forget about that. He had to know that history to abridge it. And oh, it was written in a language that he knew. The brother of Jared's record was not written in a language that he knew. And learning another 1,000 years of history in order to abridge the Jaredite account, it was non-starter from the beginning. I think it was Moroni's task from the get-go. And the way that comes through, the Lord speaks directly to Moroni so many times in the book of Ether. It's like he's giving, and when he speaks to him, he's tutoring him most often about writing the book, about abridging. And so in my head, I see Ether as Moroni's job from the beginning, and it's filled with the Lord giving Moroni guidance on how to write that book. I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but you pushed a button there.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. That's my beautiful wife down there. Hi, sweets. She has other questions for me.
Well, yeah, that's Robin that I introduced as Robin, but I'd not ever seen her. Thank you for joining us, Robin. Well, I'm intrigued on a couple of dimensions here. For one, I'm in the process of writing my autobiography. My kids have made that request. I find that I write, and well, I've completed the first draft, and then I added, and I sometimes duplicated. Last week we had Ganesh as our speaker, and he went through dozens of duplications of Joseph Smith in his writings, some duplicating, um, well, many duplications across the Book of Mormon, some across the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, the church history. And so recognizing that Joseph was duplicating many concepts that were oftentimes phrases and just as you point out tonight, sometimes quotes, certainly the consistent meanings. I find myself doing that particularly as I rewrite. And so for me, having seen those previously in the Book of Mormon, I attribute them to rewriting. And here you raise the question that you don't want to talk about. That says that this was his first draft.
Thank you, Carol. That is a much better likeness than I deserve.
Good job, Carol.
But if you post it, Brian will be sure and bring it to swim workout on Wednesday.
Well, we will post it for next week when we have our review.
Okay. Well, I there are somebody did those do-overs that I talked about.
Mhm.
I forget the gentleman's name, but he did a study of all the do-overs in Mormon's writings, and I think he found 93 of them.
Not many.
Yeah. And um I think I just don't see it as possible that, okay, let me digress for real quick. The reason I think Mormon wrote in the last 10 years of his life, because there comes a point in his writings, it's in, I think it'll be in your chapter 2, right at the end of your Mormon chapter 2. For us, it's the end of Mormon chapter 4, verse 23. And that's when he says, I, Mormon, went and collected all the records. The Lamanites were coming in, beginning to sweep over the land. He, Mormon, went and collected all of the records that had been hid up. You might remember that Amaron, when he comes to 10-year-old Mormon and says, you're going to write, he says, only take the plates of Nephi and add to those. When Mormon in that later on goes and collects the rest of the plates from their hiding place. If you look, I believe it was essential. If you look at his writings, it reflects the fact that he had the whole Nephite library with him. There was a verse in Helaman where he talks about these all of the records that were written are records about shipping, about building, about commerce, about this. And he says, again, this might be familiar and they were kept chiefly by the Nephites, indicating pretty clearly that he was aware when he's writing that chapter in Helaman, he's aware of a lot of other records. And oh, by the way, he had to find the small plates of Nephi by searching through the records. Remember that? So I think that's my reason for believing that everything that we have from the words of Mormon through the end of Mormon's writings in his own book was written in the last few years of his life. And I just don't think those years to do a rough draft and then copy it over again, I just don't see it. I'm contradicting myself by talking about how carefully he wrote in these places, but it's genius, it's inspiration, it's a lot of stuff. One of those things that maybe I'll figure out on the other side.
Here I am proposing an alternative, but your presentation is quite convincing. I acknowledge that, and I'm willing to give it far more consideration than I had previously because, my own experience as a writer says something like the Book of Mormon is virtually impossible anyway because one person doesn't put that many words out that fast in any reasonable way without having to go back and revise. And but here your point that Joseph didn't go back and revise, even putting the headings on when he had the chance, is again rather remarkable kind of, I think, mistaken representation of our history to speak of the authenticity. Like it. Thank you, Fred. Good job.
Well, thank you. This is Bri, you on your way out? Bri, you got to ask a question. Sherry, you got to ask a question. Don't you want to ask why in the world?
It's so interesting to see your personality in the pool and then now see this deep dive. I now understand. And Robin, we understand. No, we love you, Fred. Thank you. It was
Thank you.
wonderful, and I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you, Bri. Bri and I swim together with a group of people 2 or 3 times a week. And in early August, if things go as planned, the whole group of us, 10 of us, one from Cleveland and another one from St. Louis, we're going to swim the 5 Great Lakes, 1 mile in each Great Lake on the same day, Friday, the 8th of August, 7th of August. So
Wow.
anyway, it's all the same kind of insanity. So
That is crazy.
yeah, I can't wait to see. Brian, don't let anybody else make a t-shirt. My son's coming up with one to depict this craziness.
So where do you start? Where do you end?
We'll start in Hamilton, Ontario, Lake Ontario, go Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Michigan, and then end up at the right close where Michigan and Superior come together.
Okay.
If I don't return, it's been a great life.
It's wow. That's rather an intensive excursion. To how long does it take for you to swim a mile?
Right, we're giving it a half an hour in each. Generally, we can do a mile in a half an hour. So that's what we'll do. We'll swim a half an hour in each lake.
I see.
Is that the theory, Bri?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay.
Wow. Well, I commend you. In Father's Day, I had the privilege of spending time with my children, and one of the fascinating stories that came out was from my oldest daughter, who at 40 years old decided to run a marathon with no warm up, no practice. She just simply went out and started running a marathon. It took her 8 hours, but she pulled it off. But her description of the experience made it one of the more embarrassing experiences of life because of the the delightful way by which she was able to portray the discomforts that she went through made it so that everybody else who's run into some discomforts couldn't help but identify with her. Just a lot of fun. But yeah, for you to take on 5 Great Lakes in one day, that's a delightful challenge.
Well, an oldest daughter is a precious thing.
And I have 4 beautiful daughters, and they're all precious things.
Any other questions? Earl, I didn't get around to asking you to read. I hope you didn't feel neglected.
I am a very poor reader, so I would have denied.
And Dee, I don't think I quite got to you, did I? Anyway, forget I started scrambling a bit at the end, but thank you
Okay.
for helping it. You see how much it helped to break things up a little bit because I could have droned on forever.
Well, I thought you did a very good job presentation.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I feel very, very at home with you folks. I really do. Paul, your prayers, God bless you. God
Well,
bless you.
notice that I put in there God's fingerprints for us to pursue. I'd be interested in any comment you have about that. What fingerprints of the divine do you see in that book?
Well, I in a large sense, I mean, Alma chapter 5 is again, I'm sorry, which I'm going to go back to that. Give me a second here. Okay. Yeah, it's your Alma chapter 3, our Alma chapter 5, where he's teaching the people in Zarahemla. I mean, that sermon can give and give and give forever. It's virtually a bottomless well. And then to have that beautiful abbreviated version, Mormon says, many things he taught the people of Gideon that I didn't write, but just to have that follow up. The anti-Nephi Lehis. Oh my goodness. I mean, I don't think there's, aside from the Savior's ministry, I don't think there's a more compelling part of the Book of Mormon than maybe Abinadi, but just the belief that those folks had to lay down their weapons of war for peace. And, when people like to, I would say, disparage Mormon a little bit by talking about how much emphasis he gave to the war chapters, I just go back to the anti-Nephi Lehis. And that's where he said 6 times, and thus we see, and thus we see, and thus we see. 6 times, right in the space of 12 verses. I think you can make a very strong case that that's where Mormon's heart is. A huge part of his heart. I don't know that that's a good answer to your question, Paul, but thank you for asking it.
Well, but you bring up the heart again, and you had the heart and mind comparison earlier. And Enoch's people were of one heart and one mind. How do we how people become people of one heart? Here we are in a forum that draws people from across the spectrum, the chasms of the Restoration Movement and beyond. And I think to some extent we see people melding into one heart and one mind here, working from the commonalities and trying to bridge with friendships. But on the other hand, I look at our world and helping people get to one heart and one mind is very, very challenging.
Having just talked about the anti-Nephi Lehis, this is kind of a sobering thought, and I apologize in a way for it, but It is the most difficult and the most important thing ever asked in the history of the world. And yet we seem to think that it wouldn't require sacrifice.
Mhm.
Very deep and lasting and poignant and penetrating sacrifice. And I'm not saying I'm prepared to make the kind of sacrifice that the anti-Nephi-Lehites did, but I just there is that perspective. The things that we talk about, civil discourse and all, I believe in all of those things. I also believe that there's a moment to stand firm and resolute and not be civil. I think the German church in the 1930s made some mistakes in wanting to have civil discourse with their leaders. I apologize if I appear to be drawing a connection to our day, but it's what we do, how we talk can go so far, but the Lord will point the way, and we shouldn't be surprised if it calls for great, great sacrifice. But it is the ultimate destiny, I believe with all my heart. That's where this world is headed. It will one day be of one heart and one mind. But
I was intrigued in Egypt in January that the crocodiles had been mummified. Powerful crocodiles, the Sobek, the crocodile god with the crocodile head and a man's body, was standing beside the Pharaoh much of the time, and the cobra. But when you have two crocodiles with their mouths closed looking at each other, that in the hieroglyph becomes the hieroglyph for sovereignty. When we as people who are sovereign can close our mouths and face each other, provide backs upon which others can stand and walk, it's like the backs of the crocodiles of our own past that we get to walk on. But those walking on the backs of the crocodiles is what it takes for us to become the people of peace in the promised land. You got to get across that river. And like you said, it takes some courage. It's a daunting task, but walking on the backs of the crocodiles was what came across to me in Egypt as being a profound commentary on that call. And most of us are pretty much afraid of that. On the other hand, if we can be sovereign, the people are sovereign and keep their mouths closed and keep their shoulders up high, other people can stand on them and make their way to the promised land.
that's a very, very good way to put it. We have to recognize that our contribution might be analogous to a quarter inch of dirt on the top of some hill somewhere, and then somebody else comes after, and somebody else comes after. I'm not going to move the needle, but if I can add a quarter inch of dirt and those coming after me, similarly minded, at some point, somebody will be able to see the end game. And how we think about time is an important aspect of how we think about peace, I think.
Thank you so kindly for your presentation sharing, and I am so pleased with the follow-up discussion. I think it's time to conclude, and I want to conclude, O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Time, like an ever-rolling stream, bears all of us away. We fly forgotten as a dream dies at the opening day. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, be now our guide while life shall last, and our eternal home. Amen. May God bless you, and good night.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.
And Fred, if you're available for next week to come back for a 5-minute review, that would be neat, just because the review sessions We try not to give people too much time. We will also be working on the preparations for the Book of Mormon bicentennial in 2030. So it'll be a crowded session next week.